Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you to my amazing subscribers. You guys are awesome. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed, well, now's the time to hit that subscribe button. You also want to follow us on our social media pages being shown on the screen. Today's video is to teach you how to cut and sew your skirt using your block. And if you don't know how to make your block, you definitely want to check out our last video on how to draft your basic skirt block. I'm going to put a link in the description bar so you can definitely check it out. And if this is something you want to see, definitely keep watching. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to share, and lastly, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Enjoy the video. To make your skirt, you need the following items. You'll need your fabric which you're using for your skirt. In this case, I'm using Ankara and I have about 1.5 yards of Ankara. You also need some lining. I'm using black lining because I prefer it when I'm working with Ankara, and I have 1 yard of my lining because lining is longer than Ankara in length. You need your thread. I'm using black thread to match my black lining. You also need your zipper. I'm using a black zipper to match my lining and thread, of course. You also need your varying curve, and the varying curve is basically just needed to turn your block into a pattern. As it is now, we have our straight skirt block. We're going to be turning it into a pencil skirt pattern, and you can use your varying curve. However, if you don't have a varying curve, a ruler will work just fine to do the same thing. You need your paper scissors as well as your fabric scissors to cut your pattern as well as cut your fabric. You also need your pins to hold your pattern in place when cutting your fabric. You need your pencil, you need your chalk to make markings on your paper as well as your fabric. You also need your measuring tape, and lastly, you need your block. If you don't know how to make a block, please check out the video that I have linked in the description bar. The next thing we want to do is we want to do our side shaping, and the side shaping essentially just turns our block into a pattern. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a straight skirt block, but we are turning it into a pencil skirt pattern. And to do this, I'll be making use of my varying curve while you can use your ruler. I prefer to work with my varying curve. If you don't have a varying curve, it's okay. You can definitely use a ruler and achieve the same result. So working with the front block, you want to go in at the base of the side seam by 1 inch and then link it to the hip line level with your varying curve or with a slant line using your ruler as shown in the video. Unfortunately, I noticed that my video didn't catch that properly. However, I repeated it at the back, so please watch. Moving on to the back block, I mark my 1 inch at the base of the side seam area and then go in with my varying curve placed on my hip line level and then connect a line to link to the 1 inch that I marked at the base. This is basically just to shapen my skirt and give it the pegged effect. For those who don't know, a pencil skirt is also referred to as a pegged skirt. You want to repeat the same process at the center back by marking 1 inch at the base and then going in with your varying curve or your ruler at the hip line level to link to the 1 inch point which is at the base, and this completes our side shaping for the skirt block. At this point, we have successfully turned our block into a pattern. Go ahead and cut off the side shaping that we have just done so that your pattern is now ready to be cut on fabric. Fold your fabric, making sure that the wrong side is facing you. This is because you don't want chalk marks on the right side of your fabric. Then place your pattern on your fabric, ensuring that the center front is aligned with the folded part of the fabric, and then you have enough seam allowance on all sides. ensuring you have enough seam allowance, go ahead and pin your pattern down to your fabric so that it does not move. Then go ahead and mark your seam allowance on all sides. For the top part, I'll be using a seam allowance of 1/2 inch. For the side, I'll be using a seam allowance of 1 inch, and then for the hem, 1.5 inches. You can use whatever you find comfortable, but this is what works for me. I've gone ahead to mark this point, and after marking my seam allowance, I'll be cutting it. After cutting out your fabric, go ahead and cut out the lining as shown in the video. The next thing I do is to notch my dart, and I do this because it makes it easier for me while sewing. You don't have to do this, however, I just find it easier to sew my darts this way. Now that we are done cutting, it's time to head over to the sewing machine. I like to start by sewing in my dart first, and I work with my notches as well as my dart leg. To locate my dart leg on my fabric and lining, I put a pin through the dart leg point and use a chalk to mark the points as indicated so. Then I sew a line with my machine from the notches that I made earlier to the dart leg as shown in the video. After sewing both darts on the fabric, go ahead and repeat the same thing on the lining. You would also do the same thing for the back as shown in the video. Before sewing in my back dart, I like to use a pin to hold my center back pieces in place. This is for easy identification after I'm done sewing in the dart, so I can tell the center back from the side seam. After sewing in the back dart on both the fabric and the lining, go ahead and sew in your zip area. To do this, from the top of the zip area, mark a point 11 inches. This will serve as our zip area where we'll be putting in the zip. Then from the 11 inches mark, you also want to mark a point 9 inches from there vertically. This will be the area we will sew on our 1 inch allowance, and then the rest at the bottom will serve as our slit. Depending on how long or short you want your slit to be, you can play around with the 9 inches that we've just left as shown in the video. After sewing in the back dart and the zip area, you will have an opening at the top for the zip and an opening at the bottom which serves as the slit. Place your fabric with the front of the fabric facing each other and the back of the fabric facing you. Then go ahead and pin together the side seams of your fabric. This is to get it ready for sewing. After pinning the side seam of your fabric together, mark your 1 inch seam allowance and then go ahead and sew the 1 inch seam allowance. Repeat the same thing for the lining as well. It is always advisable to have your lining at least 3 or 4 inches shorter than your fabric. So at this point, I'm cutting at about 4 inches from the length of my lining on both the front and back pieces. This is because I want my lining shorter, as I said earlier. And so after cutting off the excess length on the lining, I've gone ahead to do the same thing that I did for the front, which is pin the side seam area as well as mark or indicate my seam allowance on the lining, which I'll then sew. After sewing in the side seams, you'll be left with something like this. The next thing to do is to put in our zip. To do this, flip your skirt inside out and then flip it to the back side of the skirt. On the left side of the zip area, indicate your 1-inch zip allowance. Unzip your zipper a little bit and then place the left hand side of the zipper on your fabric as shown in the video. Your zipper should be placed in such a way that the right side of the zipper is facing the right side of the fabric, then pin slantly all the way to the bottom. At this point, I find that it's convenient for me to work from inside out, so I flip my fabric inside out and continue pinning. You want to pin the other side as well, as shown in the video. After carefully pinning your zipper in place, you can go ahead and sew the zipper. The excess zipper can be cut off later. Carefully sewing your zipper as shown in the video. Be sure to avoid the zipper coils while sewing. While sewing the second part of my zip, you will notice that I've zipped it up a little bit. This is to allow my zipper lay in place properly and to make it easy for me to sew. Once you've sewn to the point where you zipped up, raise the presser foot and unzip the skirt to allow you finish sewing the zipper on. Once the zipper has been sewn in place, you would have something that looks like this, and you will notice that they are both even at the start point, which is what you want. The next thing to do is to cover our zipper with our lining, and to do this you need to unzip the zipper and place it flat on the sewing machine. Afterwards, get your lining and place your lining with the front side facing the front side of your fabric as shown in the video. It is important that when you're placing your lining on your fabric, they match at the zip area side, the dart side, and the side seam area. After ensuring they match, pin into place and sew as shown in the video. After sewing, you should have something that looks like this. Repeat the process for the second part of the video and carefully pin in place, making sure that the front side of the lining faces the front side of the fabric and the dart points, zip area, and side seam area match as shown in the video. After covering both sides of our zip area with our lining, we are now done sewing in the zipper. Cut off the excess zipper if you have any. Flip your skirt to the right side and zip it up. At this point, you will notice that we are nearly done and we are just left with the hemming of the lining and the fabric as well as the top band. The lining will be hemmed by folding in 1/2 inch twice, while the fabric will be hemmed by folding in 1/2 inch, then 1 inch as shown in the video. We'll be making a bandless skirt, and to do this, you want to sew your lining to your fabric. However, we're doing this from the inside. Slot your hand in between your lining and your fabric and then flip it out. Unzip your skirt and then hold it in such a way that the front of the lining is facing the front of the fabric. You want to ensure that the darts are matching each other as well as the side seam. After confirming that all the darts and side seam match, go ahead and pin them in place. Your side seams and darts should match if you've cut correctly and sewn as you should. After pinning all the way, go ahead and sew on an 1/2 inch seam allowance as shown in the video. After sewing, carefully remove all the pins holding the fabric and the lining together. To do this, fold in the 1 inch at the slit area as shown in the video, then fold in your hem by folding in 1/2 inch then 1 inch and sew all the way through. Remember to spread open your side seams while hemming. After hemming the fabric, hem your lining by folding in 1/2 inch twice as shown in the video. After sewing the band area and hemming both lining and fabric, flip your fabric inside out and check that your skirt looks fine. Go ahead and give your skirt a good iron, ensuring you get all the seams properly. Iron the side seams, the darts, the hem, as well as the band. Following this method, you will notice that your lining is neatly sewn, and this gives your skirt a professional finish. After giving my skirt a good iron, this is what it looks like. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. See you in my next video. Thank you. Bye.